Hello everyone, today's poem is Qin Jian Jia, a Qin Wind from the Book of Songs. This poem could be the most popular, most recited poems in the Book of Songs, the top 3 poems in the Book of Songs. And even this poem was argued through the history. Nobody is sure what it's talking about. Just like the modern poems, nobody knows what exactly the poet wants to express, what he's talking about. But anyhow, the passion, the dedication, and the beautiful scenario, most importantly, the mystery in this poem, the mysterious situation, the mysterious person, the mysterious feelings. So that attract and that was adored by the people till today. I had a video about this poem before, which adopt the general explanation for this poem. So it left a lot of space for the explanations. It's just focused on the feelings and emotions that this poem expressed, and that could be seen by everybody clearly. So it's with such a strong emotion, the passion, the love, the dedication that this poem expressed, and everybody could easily feel it. But during the time of the Book of Songs, the theory is the poem is for the purpose to record the real life. So every poem in the Book of Songs should be solidly connected with a real story or a real situation, no matter it's about a story or a situation. So that's also the main argument through the history about this poem. What the situation described in this poem. Who is the person described in this poem? So that's the main argument. So there are 3 characters aroused me to think it over, and finally I tried to pinpoint the story of this poem, the mysterious person. Who was him? I pinpoint this poem. So the 3 characters is first is the Yi. This character means he or she in modern Chinese, but when we look at the character in the Book of Songs time, the metal script or the oracle bone script, is a hand with a scepter, or it's a hand with an axis. So that's a right for a lord, no matter where around this world in the ancient time. The lord means he is the person who can rule over a group of people with the scepter. So Yi is the character described a lord with power. So in this poem, Yi Ren means a lord of the Qin state. But why didn't he wrote it as Junzi? So we saw the Jun or Junzi everywhere in the Book of Songs. I will give you the story later. The second character is Fang. 在水一方, that's a very famous sentence. Someone was in the middle of the river. 水 means the river. And the character Fang basically has 2 meanings. First thing first, a place, a country other than my place, other than my country. So it refers to a place or a country, a foreign place or a foreign country. And it also has another very key meaning: a boat, a special boat for the senior officers. So in the Zhou dynasty, the people are leveled. So the boat for the king is so called as Zhao Zhou, which means when he crossed the river, he paralleled many boats together and make the boats just like a bridge, so he can cross over that bridge made of the boat. And the lord of the state takes the boat, so called as Wei Zhou, which means several boats, they are grouped together, they are tied up together, so make it a much bigger platform, a bigger boat. So it will be a very stable and safe in a big rough river. And the senior officer will take the boat, which so-called as Fangzhou, which means two boats paralleled and tied up. So that's a safe boat as well. And the normal people, the general average people, will take a fu, which means many branches was tied up as a flat panel, and the average people will take the fu to cross the river. So when we see the character Fang, so basically two possibilities. And in these circumstances, 在水一方, so this character should be referring to the boat, right? Because we didn't talking to a foreign place, foreign country, or foreign country. It's somewhere within our eyesight, and it's in the river, right? And the Fang would always referred to a place with humans. So the meaning should be referring to the boat for the senior officers. And the third character is Wan. So in today's situation, Wan means some very mild and sophisticated scenarios alike, something alike, and it's a tentative, mild. It's hard to tell, but it's something alike. 宛然 means something alike that status. But when we search the whole book of songs, it have several points have this character, and it was always related with a death. 晚期死矣 is one of the poem in the book of songs, and normally it was always translated as it's just like that person has died. But when we go through the whole poem, that person has died, of course. It's not just like him died. So one is not just like, it means another thing. Another poem of the Qin Wind gave me a clue. The poem 小容. So it described the situation when they pulling the coffin of the Lord to his cemetery. And this is a very, very key event, one of the most big events in a state in the time of the Zhou dynasty. And we can see many stories in another history book, 春秋左传. So they have several stories and described the situation and the stories when they pulling the coffin, the Lord's coffin, from the ancestors' temple to the cemetery. And that's the very, very key events, a big thing for the whole state. And that's why go through the poem again. Everything is so clear. Let's see. Okay, let's see the poem. First paragraph. 蒹葭苍苍，白露为霜. The reeds is so prosperous and it's drying out. 苍苍 describe the color, and it also describes it so prosperously growed. 白露为霜, 白露为霜 pinpoint the time. It's one of the 24 solar terms. It's roughly the end of October or the beginning of the November. And it's the time when the first frost came. And the ancient Chinese has a saying for the 4 seasons, and that's the philosophy of their life as well. 春生夏成秋收冬藏, which means the people's lifestyle or even the life itself should compliant to the 4 seasons. And the season for the autumn is harvest, and the season for the winter is to hide up. 藏 means you hide something to stay down, just like the bear to hide in a cave in the winter. So that means, and it also means killing. So some creatures, they could hide away, stay down, and then till the next spring they can continue their life. And a bunch of creatures in the winter's time is just lost its life, and that's the call from the nature. So that's the power of the nature, and all the creatures, even the human, should adapt compliant to the law of nature. So winter is a time of killing and death. So the first sentence gave us a very, very clear indication, a metaphor that associated with the time, because he pinpointed the time, which means death. There's something about death happened. And then let's go to the next sentence. 所谓伊人，在水一方. So that capable Lord was so praised, and his story spread out everywhere. 所谓 means everybody was telling his stories. Everybody know that Lord. So that famous Lord, he was on a boat in the center of the river. So here is 2 things. We have shared something about the 2 characters, Yi and Fang. And these 2 characters pinpoint to a lord of the Qin state. And actually, in that time, it's not a state. It's a sort of the territory, because he's a junior state, or we could call it a junior state, because there's so many levels in the Zhou dynasty. The lord of Qin in that time became a very, very junior state, and he even cannot be called as a lord like Junzi. He was so called as Yin or Yi. So he is with the power, but he was much less people with a smaller territory, and but he was assigned a senior officer by the King of Zhou. So that refers to the Qin Zhuang Gong. So from the term Qin Zhuang Gong is a lord. He could be called a Junzi, but in his lifetime, he just a senior officer. He could not be called as a lord, a Junzi. So he was so called as Yin, and that's also compliant to the boat he was taken, the boat of Fang. So the boat of Fang was for the senior officer of the Zhou king, right? So he belongs to the third level in the Zhou dynasty. So the first level, the king; the second level, the Zhuhou or Junzi in the Book of Songs. The third level, there's no equivalent in English. I call him junior lord, and in Chinese, Yi or Yin. So the boat for him is the Fang. And in the history of the Qin tribe or the Qin state, the Qin Zhuang Gong was the only person. He was assigned as a senior officer from the Zhou king, and his son became a lord, a junzi. Because he has do a great favor for the Zhou king to help him to relocate from the old capital to the new capital of Luoyang city, and thus he was assigned as a lord. He could be called as a junzi or a zhuhou somehow. So from the first poem, the first two pair of sentences gave us a very clear time, and it gave us a strong implication. It's something about death, and it tells us very clearly who is that guy, Qin Zhuang Gong, and he was in a boat in the middle of a river. Shui is not water; it's always referred to the river in the Book of Songs. Okay, let's continue. 速回从之，道阻且长. So in the old saying, 速回 means to against the stream of the river. But I don't think that's the way. 速 means to go against the stream of the river. 回 means the river was curved, and sometimes it whirled like a circle somewhere. That's a very typical situation in when the river go through the mountains. The river cannot go straight like a straight line, so it goes to the left, go to the right, and sometimes it curves like a circle. So 速回 means the boat go against the river, and sometimes it's curved along the river. 道阻且长 I also has a very strong argument toward this sentence. 阻 in the Zhou's time, the character is like a picture. So when we look at the picture of 阻, the left part means a place. The right part means the ancestor, the place for the ancestor, the cemetery. So 道阻 means the bunch of people, the lord, the junior lord, was on a boat going to the cemetery or go to the ancestor's temple. So it could be the ancestor's temple or could be the cemetery. They all means the place of the ancestors. And the next character, 且, it also could be read as 举, which means the ancestor. And I would rather think in this poem it means the ancestor. So they are going to the cemetery or going to the ancestor temples, and their ancestors are big. 长 means big. It's a very normal character to describe their lord. But in this poem, they use a different term. The general term is 美. Today it becomes it means very beautiful. But in the Book of Songs time, it means big. Or 硕, 硕人, a big guy. So the ultimate praise for the Lord is big. And 长 also means big. So it's the third pair of sentences means the boat was against the stream, go upstreams, and sometimes it curves back and forth. They are going to the cemetery, and the ancestors are big. He is so magnificent. Okay, the third pair of sentence. 溯游从之，宛在水中央。溯 against the stream. So when you're against the stream, it could be that against, or it could be cut through the stream, right? When you go through the river, you cut through the river with an angle. It's against the stream, but with an angle to the other side of the river. So 游 means to cross the river. So normally it means cross the river. And 游 means you are cross river on foot. So here is very interesting. There is a boat in the river, and but some people, they are cross the river on foot. That is reasonable, because in the northern China, in this area, in the winter's time, the river became shallow. You can cross the river on foot. But in the summertime, in the winter's time, the river is big. You cannot cross the river on foot. If the flood, there's a flood by the heavy rains, you cannot even stay close to the river, because the river became much wider and rushed to the edge of the river. And so the river changed dramatically during the 4 seasons, and in the winter, most of the river you can just go cross the river on your feet. And 宛在水中央, so 宛, the third key characters in this poem, it means to pull over the rope which attached to the coffin. So you can have refer to another video, the Qin Wind, 小荣, the small chariot. I have a very detailed explanation about situation. So when we look at to the history book, we know this lord of Qin Zhuang Gong, he was buried in this place in Gansu province, Lixian, and his son was also buried here, and his grandson, a very famous lord of Qin Mugong, he relocated the cemetery to another place, which is near Baoji city today. So we know, and when we look at the map, so we can pinpoint where is their village or their town is. You can see this small river, Xi They are against the stream. They are go upstream, right? So this is the place they lived, and today this is the city of this county, and this area basically is mountains, and the city is located on a small basin. So that's the place a civilized tribe, a civilized people would live their life at. They have their crops, they are farmers, they are also half nomad. They have many sheep in this flat basin, and in the mountain they cannot have much population, right? And we know the Qin people, they gathered together. Finally they became a powerful tribe, a powerful state, a little bit by a little bit, and so they should live in this basin, and their cemetery was found out in the last 30 years. And you can see the map. It's a very good place per the feng shui saying. You can see the cemetery was on the standalone mountain on the top, and to the south, which means when you're facing the sun on the mountain foot, there is a curved river. So that's the best feng shui for a cemetery. You have the mountain on your back and you face a curved river and to the south direction. So from this poem, you also can pinpoint where the place the Qin people lived, their town was, because they go upstream to get to their cemetery. We know the cemetery by the modern archaeology, and then we can pinpoint their town, their city, by this poem. So basically, the first paragraph is telling us the key information is the Lord, the junior Lord, Qin Zhuang Gong, has died, and the people was pulling his coffin to the cemetery. The coffin was on a boat along upstream the river to their cemetery, and a lot of people was pulling the coffin, and the coffin was in the middle of the river Xihanshui. Let's see the second paragraph. It's quite much easier if we know the first paragraph. 蒹葭萋萋，白露未晞. The reeds was so prosperous and a little bit wet because the frost was became the dew on the reed. The time the sun has gone up and the temperature is getting much warmer, the frost melt and it became the dew on the reed sleeves. 白露未晞 means the dew doesn't dry out yet. So we know hours has been passed because when they start in the early morning, maybe before the daybreak, and the frost is everywhere on the ground, on the sleeves of the reed, and hours later they pulling the coffin upstream the river. The sun get up, it's getting much warmer. The frost melt and becomes the dew on the sleeves of the reed, but it still not dry up yet. Let's go ahead. 所谓伊人在水之迷, and finally they reached to the cemetery upstream the river, and they pull over the coffin, the boat of coffin, to the edge of the river. Mi means the river edge, the bound. 数回从之，道阻且寂；溯游从之，宛在水中底. So it's a long way to get here. They go upstream and circled a lot of times, and they are heading to the cemetery, and they are getting up and up. 几 means go up. And this also is a very vivid simulation to the logic of the ancient Chinese, because they think when a lord died, they go up to the skies. So here, 几 means two things. They go upstream of the river, so they are getting up and up. And in the same time, their Lord was on his halfway to the heaven. he's died, he will go up to the sky from the ground and leave everybody to the ground. So that's the funeral means for the ancient Qin people. Okay, let's continue. 素有从之，宛在水中底. So they sometimes they against river, sometimes they cross river, and they are pulling the boat, boat of coffin, and finally reached to a big platform. Di has normally means the big flat stone in the ancestors' temple. So it's that's the place for their sacrifice purpose, for some rituals for the sacrifice. And finally, it also has the meaning of the family or the foundation, because that's the foundation of the family. It has the extended meaning to many ways. And in the normal explanation, this character was labeled as 指, but I think here it should be read as 底. It means the boat, the coffin, was go up to the bund, and it was put at a big flat ground which was built for this funeral. The coffin was at the ancestors' temple at the very beginning in the town, and we can see from this map it's a long way upstream the river to the cemetery. So there's all kinds of situations. So they had done a lot of preparation work to prepare the road to the cemetery for this big, heavy coffin. It's a very, very big coffin, and there's a saying that when the King of Zhou has died, 1,000 people was need to put the big giant coffin of the king. Of course, here it's not the King of Zhou, but the way to the cemetery is a really hard way. And so finally, in the second paragraph, the coffin was finally put over to the ground, the edge of the river, and where was a big flat platform prepared before the funeral. 宛在水中底. So they are pulling on the flat ground. Okay, the third paragraph basically is repeating the first two and second paragraph. 蒹葭采采，白露未已. The reed was so prosperous and shining, and the duel was almost over, but still not finished, which means the weather is cold. Even hours past, the sun is very high in the sky. It still did not dry out the dew on the reed sleeves. 所谓伊人在水之涘, that famous junior lord, he was at the top of the river bound. So from here, I think normally in the general explanation, the 涘 was explained as the edge of the river, but here I think it's the top of the mountain already. So the coffin was put over to its final destination. 溯回从之，道阻且右. So we came after a long way in the river, and we are heading to the cemetery. And 道族举右, we are heading to the cemetery, and for the ancestors' sake, we are blessed, we are protected. 右 means blessed from a senior person, from the god. So if we explain 且 as and, so in the general explanation, 且 was explained as and, as today. 道族且右 is really hard to explain. So there's so many arguments on this. But if we treat this character as 举, as the ancestors, it's very reasonable. We are heading to the cemetery, and after such a long and difficult way, we have finally arrived to the destination because our ancestors blessed us. Our ancestors protect us. That's the meaning of 右. 右 is blessing and protect from a senior people to the junior person. Okay, the last sentence. 溯游从之，宛在水中沚. So we have finally crossed the river, and we are pulling in the island of the river. So let's look at the map again. So you can see this curve of the river here in this place. So when the coffin was put up to the mountain, it's just like an island because the river is all around this mountain. It's just make the mountain like an island in the big river. So here it has two metaphors. First thing first, finally they arrived to the destination by crossing the river. So that's a very, very normal way of indirectly telling that a big success. 继, so in another word, 继, you made it up. You have a success on something. And here it tells us they finally cross the river and go to that island, the destination, right? They reached to the final land. And this is also a metaphor of the junior lord. Finally, he reached his destination, the cemetery. So if we relate this poem to this real situation, this poem is not so mysterious, right? And it has the characteristics of the poem in the Zhou dynasty. 诗言志, the poem is used to record the real life, but it's writing in such beautiful ways, and it also has its own way, his creativity on the writings. Because let's see, for example, the starting point. The typical starting is here is something, there is something, but this starting is the reed is so prosperous. So it's not just by telling there is something. He just made it very clear. The reed is prosperous. It adds more characters. It has some more flavors in this sentence. And then in the second half of this sentence, it 白露为霜 is pinpoint to the time. So the timing is always a very, very key element in the Chinese literature, in the classic poetry, even to the Tang Dynasty. So when you read the classic poems, pay special attention to the time. They have a very, very strong focus and sensitivity to the timing. And in the poems of a Book of Songs, very few or none of the poems they get to the timing in the first pair of sentences. They come to the timing things, of course, but in a second, third pair of sentence. So in this sentence, so this poem basically expresses a lot of stuffs, and it's much more sophisticated than most of the poems in the Book of Songs, because it was written in the most late time among the poems of the Book of Songs. And the poet who was writing this poem, he should learn a lot from other poems in the Book of Songs. And that's also the Tang poetry. The poets from the Tang Dynasty, they have the same way of writing poems. They learned a lot from the previous dynasty, from the previous poems, and they inherit a lot as at the same time they create a lot of their own. So the heritage plus the creativity makes a real great poem, a real great Chinese classic poem. Okay, that's for today. Bye bye.